Where's she at?
In the house. Trying to lock me out.
Who else is in the house?
Just her.
Where's the firearm at?
In my vehicle. And I took her firearm for her. I came home, all my stuff outside, threw all my stuff out, grabbed a glass, I hit me in the head with it, grabbed
any other firearms in there?
Not in the house. I took them away from her.
Okay.
I took her firearm away from her, and I
Go make contact with him, please, or her, please.
A door slammed so hard the porch light shook. A man stood outside barefoot, shouting through the crack, his breath cutting the cold morning air. "She locked me out," he yelled. "My stuff's out here, everything." Pants, shirts, even framed pictures lay scattered across the wet steps like someone had torn a life apart. A police car rolled up, lights washing the walls red and blue. The man's hands trembled as he pointed toward the house. "She's inside. Please, don't let her touch the gun. I put it high, in the garage. Mine's in the truck. I just want her calm." Another cruiser stopped. 2 officers stepped out, calm but alert, eyes scanning the porch, the open garage, the torn photos glinting under streetlight. It was barely dawn, 5:42 a.m., and this quiet block already sounded like the end of something. 2 people had called 911 at the same minute. Each one said the same words. "They're trying to hurt me." And just like that, a marriage of 6 years turned into a crime scene. The primary aggressor. The officers stepped out of their cars and walked slowly toward the house, their shoes pressed against the gravel, crunching in rhythm with the quiet hum of radios clipped to their shoulders. The blue and red lights washed over everything, the lawn, the garage door, even the man's tired face. His eyes followed them anxiously, the kind of eyes that hadn't closed all night. Inside the open garage, pieces of a broken picture frame glittered under the dull light. The photograph inside was bent and wet, the smiling faces torn through the middle. A few feet away lay a pile of clothes, a tipped-over box, and a small wooden cross that looked like it had fallen from the wall. The air smelled faintly of perfume and dust, the kind of smell that still carries warmth even when the people who left it behind are angry. One officer stopped beside the man, his voice calm but firm. He asked who else was inside. The man's throat tightened before he answered. "No kids," he said quietly. "Just her." The second officer nodded. He glanced toward the front door, paint chipped, blinds swaying from a half-closed window. "We'll talk to you both," he said, steady but without emotion. "Separately." The man only nodded again. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of every word he'd said had pulled him down a little more. The night before, this had been just another house. Now it felt like a trap, with every window watching, every wall holding its breath. The officers moved closer to the door. From inside came a faint sound, something falling over, a muffled voice, maybe a sob. No one could tell. But everyone knew one thing. Peace had already left this house hours ago. The morning felt heavier than it should. The kind of morning that had no music, no birds, just that heavy silence that sits after shouting. One of the officers stood with the man at the edge of the porch, while the other slipped into the house to speak with the woman. From outside, their voices rose and fell. 2 sides of the same broken story. The man's hands were shaking, but he spoke as if he'd rehearsed it 100 times in his mind before they arrived. His words came out steady but tired, almost begging to be believed. He said he had worked late the night before, helping a friend pick up a car from out of town. It was supposed to be quick, he said, but things took longer than expected. By the time they finished and made the long drive home, it was already past 5 in the morning. He looked down at the ground when he spoke about what he saw when he came back. His belongings tossed out like garbage, his clothes wet from the dew, his mother's framed photo cracked on the steps. He said he tried to talk to her, tried to understand why she had done it. She accused him of cheating. He swore he wasn't. He said she didn't want to listen. She threw a glass. It shattered. She picked up another. He said he never hit her, that he couldn't, that his mother raised him better than that. When she grabbed something sharp, he said, he panicked. He reached for her gun and hid it up high, on a shelf in the garage, where she couldn't reach it. He said it wasn't about power or anger, it was about safety. He said he was afraid of what she might do, to him or to herself. But just a few steps away, inside the same house, her version was unfolding with its own quiet fire. She stood near the kitchen counter, her voice sharp but calm, each word like a nail being pressed into wood. She said he had left the previous morning with no explanation. No calls, no messages, just a random location pin hours later from another city. She said when he came back, he didn't even look at her, just walked in, grabbed his things, took her keys and got into her car like nothing had happened. She said she felt disrespected, invisible, like she was living with a stranger who no longer cared whether she cried or screamed. She said he broke her computer monitor when she tried to stop him, then pointed her own gun at her near the back door. That door, she told the officer, was the one that led to the yard, the one she could have run through if she hadn't frozen in place. The officers listened to both of them. Each story made sense on its own. Each one felt like the truth when it was being told, yet neither fit neatly into the other. Out on the porch, the man sat on the edge of the step, rubbing his palms together, his jaw tight. Inside, the woman stood with her arms crossed, staring at the floor, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was that heavy kind of quiet that follows a fight you can't take back. Somewhere between their two stories, between the shattered glass and the hidden gun, between hurt pride and real fear, lay the question that would soon decide everything. Who was the danger? Who was the victim? And in the eyes of the law, who would be called the primary aggressor? The officers moved carefully through the house, taking photographs, marking where things had fallen. The living room looked like a storm had passed through it. Nothing broken beyond repair, but everything slightly off. A chair was turned over, one curtain torn, a trail of small glass pieces leading toward the kitchen. On the counter, a phone screen still glowed faintly, showing a paused camera feed from outside. One of the officers picked it up and scrolled. The video clips were silent, grainy shapes of two people moving in and out of the frame. In one, the woman was seen dragging a suitcase toward the door. In another, the man stood beside the car, trying to talk while she threw something onto the driveway. Each clip felt incomplete, like watching half of a sentence and never hearing the rest. The officer asked if the cameras had audio. The woman nodded, still rubbing her arm as she spoke. "Only outside," she said quietly. "He's going to twist it, say I'm jealous. But I wasn't. I just wanted respect." Her voice cracked a little at that last word, the way someone's voice does when they've repeated a sentence too many times in their own head. The officer didn't respond. He just wrote something down in his notepad, then asked her to lift her head. When she tilted her face toward the light, there was a faint swelling near her lip, pink and small, but real. He noted it silently. Outside, the other officer stood with the man beside the car. He asked again about the gun. The man sighed deeply, pressing his fingers to his forehead. "It wasn't loaded," he said. "It wasn't even cocked. There wasn't a round in the chamber. I only said, 'Stop playing with me,' when she came at me with that yard tool. I didn't mean it as a threat." His voice broke for the first time. "I was just scared," he whispered. The officer studied him for a long moment. Fear and guilt often looked the same. Tired eyes, trembling hands, voices that cracked halfway through a sentence. It was hard to tell the difference. Inside, the woman sat at the edge of the couch, silent now, her eyes red. Outside, the man stood by the car, staring at the ground. Between them were broken glass, bruises, and two stories that didn't fit together. The house felt thick with unspoken things. Every wall seemed to hold a secret, every item a memory. The officers moved between them like quiet judges, gathering pieces that didn't yet make sense. Later, someone would type their names into a report. Later, a courtroom would decide who started it, who lied, who lost control. But right now, in that dim house with the smell of rain still hanging in the air, none of them knew what would come next. All that mattered were three small words that carried the weight of everything that had happened: intent, fear, capability. Those three words, cold and clinical on paper, would decide the next 3 months of their lives. Outside, the morning had begun to pale, the kind of slow gray light that turns everything colorless. The lawn was scattered with clothes, papers, and a few broken things that had once meant something. A picture frame lay face down near the edge of the grass, its glass cracked across the face of a smiling woman who no longer looked alive through the split. An officer moved quietly through the mess, snapping photographs while the other stood by the half-open garage door. The sensor light blinked red, confused by how many times it had been forced up and down. The air was thick with the smell of oil and wet dirt. Inside, the woman sat on the bottom step, arms wrapped around her knees. Her voice was low but edged with anger that had nowhere left to go. "He kept pushing the garage up," she said, staring at the floor. "I was just trying to close it, just to make him stay out after he pointed the gun. I wanted space. That's all. I just wanted distance." The officer nodded but didn't answer. He had heard too many versions of just and only to know they didn't always mean safety. Outside, the man leaned against his truck, eyes fixed on the half-broken garage door. "She kept slamming it down," he said softly. "She was trying to lock me out, but my friend's car was inside. If she broke that thing, I'd be done. It's not even my car." His words came out slow, like they were being dragged from somewhere deep and heavy. Both of them talked about doors, one trying to close it, the other trying to keep it open. But neither was really talking about wood or metal. It was control. It was pride. It was the need to win a fight that had already gone too far. The officers stood between them, writing in their notes, not taking sides. They had learned something that most people never do, that sometimes love doesn't die quietly. It falls apart in flashes, loud, confusing, and full of the kind of pain that makes people do things they later swear they didn't mean. By now, the morning light had pushed fully through the trees. The red and blue lights from the patrol cars faded to a dull reflection on the wet driveway. But the tension didn't fade. It sat heavy in the air, thicker than smoke. It didn't matter who had the better story, or who had cried first, or who had more bruises. None of that changed the question that hung silently over everyone's head. Who had crossed the line first? Who had turned anger into action? Because in the end, it wasn't about who was louder or who hurt more. It was about one small, cold truth that would soon decide everything. Who escalated to force first? The house had gone still again. No yelling, no glass breaking, no movement except the faint hum of the refrigerator and the slow ticking of the wall clock above it. The kind of silence that feels loud because it has too much inside it. The man stood in the kitchen doorway, his hands rubbing together, not from cold but from nerves. His voice had shrunk to almost a whisper now, raw around the edges. "We've been married 6 years," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I didn't want this. I just wanted her to calm down." He looked around the house like he didn't recognize it anymore. The couch they had bought together, the table where they used to eat, the shelf with her candles and the photos of his mother. It all looked strange, like a museum of a life that didn't belong to him. On the other side of the room, the woman sat with her back against the wall. Her eyes were red, her breathing uneven, but her voice came out calm, almost defeated. "I just wanted him to talk to me," she said, "before he touched anything, before he took my keys, before he made me feel like I didn't matter." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I needed respect." Her words landed heavy, not like anger anymore, more like exhaustion. The officer standing nearest to her didn't interrupt. He had seen this before, the way people stop fighting when they realize love has already left the room. But beneath that calm was something sharper. Every word carried a hint of blame, a thread of fear, a touch of humiliation that hadn't yet burned out. The man's eyes lifted, watery but proud, as if he wanted to say more, to defend himself, to apologize, to fix something. But he didn't. The gap between them felt too wide now, too dangerous to cross. The officers exchanged quiet looks, trying to read what wasn't being said. The body language, the way his hands twitched when she moved, the way her jaw tightened when he spoke. It all told a story that words couldn't. Outside, the wind had died down, but the air still felt charged, like static before lightning. This wasn't peace. It was the pause before something gave way. Love, when it's hurt, doesn't disappear. It lingers, heavy and stubborn, hiding behind pride and fear. It makes people say things they don't mean and hold on to things they should have let go long ago. The officer wrote a final line in his notepad but didn't say it aloud. Love is a terrible witness. It remembers everything and explains nothing. The officers moved with careful precision now, their voices low, their steps slow. They had stopped trying to comfort either of them. This was the part where emotion no longer mattered. Only evidence did. In the garage, one officer slid on a pair of thin gloves and climbed onto a step stool. The shelves above the workbench were cluttered with boxes, tools, and old paint cans. Dust swirled in the beam of his flashlight. Then he saw it. A small gray box tucked between a pair of boots. Inside lay a compact black pistol, cool and still, like a secret waiting to be found. He lifted it gently, checked the chamber, then looked at his partner. "Unloaded," he said softly. "No round in it." He noted the serial number on his pad, his handwriting steady and practiced. Outside, the other officer radioed the find in, his tone clipped and official. Back in the living room, the woman watched through the half-open garage door, her face pale in the early light. Her sister had arrived and stood close behind her, arms crossed tightly, anger already boiling beneath the surface. "He does this," the sister said, voice sharp. "Every time. He records, twists everything, makes her look crazy." The officer didn't answer. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice even, "we'll keep this orderly." But his eyes flicked toward the woman, studying her reaction, the way her jaw clenched, the way she blinked hard to stop the tears from showing. The man stood farther back, near his truck, watching the officers handle the gun. His face was unreadable, calm on the outside, but his breathing betrayed him. Every few seconds, he wiped his palms on his jeans, as if to keep control of something invisible. The tension between them filled the air like static. No one shouted anymore. No one needed to. Every movement, every silence, carried the weight of accusation. The officers began piecing the timeline together, their notes growing longer, their questions sharper. Who touched the gun first? Who said what? Who grabbed what? Every detail mattered now because soon only one version would be written into the report. In that moment, the woman's eyes drifted toward her sister, then toward the officers. "He's lying," she whispered, but not loud enough to be heard. The man caught the motion, and for a brief second, their eyes met across the garage. No words passed between them, but something fierce did. A mix of love, guilt, and fear that neither wanted to feel anymore. The officer standing between them finally spoke, his tone quiet but firm. "Listen," he said, "it doesn't matter who called first." He paused, letting the words hang heavy. "The law doesn't care who picked up the phone. It only cares who crossed the line, who turned an argument into something that can't be undone." Outside, the wind picked up again, moving through the trees like a warning. Inside the house, the silence returned. Thicker this time, more dangerous. They all knew what came next. Someone was about to be named the one who went too far. Someone was about to be called the primary aggressor. The morning light had fully broken through the clouds now, painting the driveway in dull gold. The air was colder, sharper, as if it too knew something final was about to happen. The officers had finished taking notes, finished speaking in low voices that sounded more like verdicts than questions. The man stood near the porch, motionless. The woman leaned against the garage frame, her arms crossed, her eyes darting between them, searching for some hint of mercy. One of the officers stepped closer, his voice quiet, almost apologetic. "Ma'am," he said, "turn around for me." She blinked, confused. "What?" "Turn around," he repeated, softer this time. "Face the wall, hands behind your back." It took a moment for the words to land. Then she laughed once, not from humor, but from shock. "You're arresting me?" Her voice cracked, trembling as she tried to hold on to her composure. "He pointed a gun at me. You saw the gun. He's the one who—" The officer didn't raise his voice. "Based on testimony, injuries, and the sequence of events," he said, each word careful, official, final, "you are being arrested for battery under the family violence statute. You'll see a judge this morning. There may be a no-contact order." Her face went pale. Her hands, now behind her back, shook slightly as the cold steel cuffs clicked shut. The sound was small but deafening. The air seemed to freeze around it. The man didn't move. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just stared at the ground like someone watching a building collapse in slow motion. A car pulled up at the end of the driveway. Her father stepped out quickly, confusion painted across his face. His voice cracked with disbelief as he hurried toward the officers. "Officer," he said, "please. She's never been in trouble a day in her life. Please." The second officer turned to him, calm but firm. "Sir, I understand," he said quietly, "but it's out of our hands now. The court will handle bond and conditions. This has to go through the process." Her father's shoulders sagged. He looked at his daughter, small, handcuffed, trembling, surrounded by flashing lights, and something inside him broke. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The only sound was the faint tick of the officer's radio and the soft hum of the morning wind moving through the trees. She looked at her husband one last time. Her eyes weren't angry anymore, just hollow, stunned. Maybe she wanted him to say something, anything. Maybe she wanted him to stop it, but he stayed silent, frozen in his own guilt or fear or both. The officers led her toward the patrol car, one hand on her arm to guide her. The metallic door opened, and for a brief second, everything stopped. No movement, no breath, no sound. Then the door closed, sealing the moment shut with a dull, heavy thud. Later, people would see the footage online. They would argue about it for weeks, choosing sides, dissecting every gesture and word. But on that driveway, it didn't take weeks. It took 12 minutes. 12 quiet, brutal minutes to decide who would wear the label that morning. And just like that, the woman who had once called the police for help became the one in handcuffs. The patrol car door shut with a hollow, final sound that seemed to echo all the way down the quiet street. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The blue lights still flashed lazily across the houses, their glow reflecting off windows where curious neighbors now peeked through half-open blinds. The early sun was rising behind the trees, painting the street in soft pink and gold, as if the world had no idea what had just happened here. Her father stood at the end of the driveway, one hand pressed to his forehead, his other hand gripping his keys like he might break them in half. The sister paced back and forth near the lawn, her jaw tight, her eyes burning red from crying and rage. The man stood by the front steps, looking small against the backdrop of the home he once shared. His voice, when it finally came, was thin, shaking, almost childlike. "I didn't want this," he said softly, not looking up. "Please, tell her I'll answer if she calls, if she can." One of the officers turned toward him, his face unreadable, but his tone cold and firm. "If there's a no-contact order," he said, "you can't pick up that call, not once. Even one message could violate the judge's ruling. Do you understand?" The man nodded slowly, though his eyes said he didn't. He looked past the patrol car, past the blinking lights toward the house, toward the open garage where a picture of his mother still lay face down on the concrete. The sister stopped pacing. Her anger boiled over into trembling words. "He started it," she said suddenly, her voice shaking as tears rolled down her face. "He started it. With words, with control. Why isn't that counted?" No one answered her. Not the officers, not her father, not the man standing by the porch. The world just kept turning, the air heavy with something too complicated for paperwork to explain. From the car window, the woman's face was barely visible, just her reflection in the glass, blurred by sunlight and shame. Maybe she was crying. Maybe she was silent. No one could tell anymore. Her father turned away, pressing his hands against his face. The sister whispered a prayer that no one could hear. The man exhaled and looked up at the sky, his lips moving but no words coming out. The flashing lights faded slowly as the patrol car pulled away, its tires crunching over the gravel and out into the waking street. The neighborhood returned to its stillness, but the silence wasn't peace anymore. It was the sound of something broken that couldn't be fixed. Violence always leaves marks, bruises, scars, holes in walls. But contempt, that one is quieter. It hides beneath words, behind smiles, inside marriages that look perfect from the outside. Violence leaves fingerprints. Contempt is invisible. By morning, the street had already begun pretending nothing happened. The neighbors who filmed from their blinds now watered their lawns like they hadn't watched someone's life collapse at dawn. The patrol cars were gone, the flashing lights faded, and all that remained was the cold shape of silence. The kind that stays behind when people run out of words. The house stood there like a crime scene that didn't want to be one. Clothes still clung to the wet grass. A photo frame leaned against the porch, cracked across a smiling face. Inside, the floor was littered with everything they once shared. Arguments turned into objects. Love turned into evidence. She sat miles away now behind a gray metal door, her wrists still sore from the cuffs. She had never been arrested before. Her voice still echoed in her head. He pointed a gun at me. But no one cared anymore. Not the system, not the law, not even the truth. The only thing that mattered was whose story looked cleaner on paper. He sat on the porch, eyes blank, phone in hand, the contact name, my wife, glowing on the screen he wasn't allowed to touch. He said he didn't want this, but there was something quiet in his face, something almost relieved. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was victory. No one could tell. And that's the problem. If she threw first, she's dangerous. If he pointed first, he's a threat. If they both loved each other, why did they call for help instead of each other? The line between victim and aggressor had blurred so completely that even the law had to pick one just to move the paperwork along. The state called it justice. The neighbors called it drama. The internet would call it proof. Proof that the system always sides with one, never with both. But if the first weapon lifted was a voice, does that count? If a man says he's scared but holds the gun, who's really in danger? If a woman fights back after years of being spoken over, is it assault or survival? No one agrees and no one ever will. The report will say battery, family violence. The comments section will say everything else. And somewhere between those two versions, between bruised skin and broken pride, the truth will drown quietly without a witness. Because the real question isn't who went too far. It's who the world decides to believe when both are bleeding.
But to that point, and we both on this lease of the house. We don't have that much bread like that since like COVID and everything. We both kind of work to kind of pay bills and stuff. She got a place to go. I really don't know where to go. I might get a hotel for a night maybe, but it's gonna be out of some money I don't have. So when I put the gun up top, because I knew she couldn't reach it. So she tried to close the garage. She tried to close the garage now because she didn't want to be out. So she go, I don't know what she's doing. I was like, no, you can't close the garage. I don't know what you're going to do. This man's car here, that's not what you do, store this man's car that I don't own. I don't own that man's car. And I can't afford to pay for that man's car. We break his windows, slash his tires, any other crazy shit. She threw my dollar and drove my side. I'm like, lady, you crazy? What are you doing? You ain't never went that far before.
Hutchinson Road, just past Jack's